Good afternoon, and thank you everybody for being on time. I'm Howie Hawkins. I'm the Green Party candidate for 4th District Councilor, and it's my honor to introduce Kevin Bott, the Green Party candidate for mayor. You know, votes for Green Party candidates today are no longer just send them a message votes. Green candidates are the alternative that can win. I would remind you that as 4th District Councilor 2 years ago, I got 48% of the vote. I would remind you that those who think the mayoral race is all but over, that yesterday's candidate, Stephanie Miner, who won the Democratic primary, only got 150 more votes than the combined vote of the Republican and the Conservative in 2009 in a city that has a 6-to-1 enrollment advantage for the Democrats over the Republicans. And the working class majority of this city is progressive, not conservative. Kevin Bott is the progressive choice for Syracuse. I would also remind you that yesterday, 2 out of 3 Miner-backed candidates were defeated. Miner and the Miner machine are vulnerable. I would remind you that Miner's vote yesterday was only about 3,600. That's 400 down from 2009. And that the Green Party candidate for Congress, spending $15,000 against 2 $5 million candidates from the major parties, got over 3,200 votes. So we're within striking distance. Voters in Syracuse increasingly support the Greens' progressive policies. I would also remind you yesterday that Mayor Miner's favorite mayor, Michael Bloomberg, was repudiated by the vote in New York City with Bill de Blasio's strong victory. That may be a harbinger of things to come in Syracuse. The truth is the mayoral race really hasn't begun. We just had 2 debates in the last week of August while everybody's at the State Fair before Labor Day, and yesterday's very low turnout, I think, is testament to the fact that people have just begun to tune into this race. So the real debate's about to begin now between a status quo where one party has every elected official in the city, the Democrats, and the Greens' progressive alternative. Kevin Bott can beat Stephanie Miner. Kevin will campaign on the Greens' progressive platform, and he will outline some of those planks shortly. But I want to say that I'm especially enthusiastic about Kevin's candidacy because he exemplifies the kind of collaborative leadership style this city needs to move forward. It's the collaborative leadership that was taught to my generation of activists from the 1960s by people like Ella Baker and Bob Moses of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or SNCC. They fostered the leadership and initiative of those they organized, like Fannie Lou Hamer, a sharecropping cotton picker who became the powerful spokesperson for the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party Challenge in 1964. Kevin is part of an upcoming generation of activists that are carrying that tradition of collaborative leadership forward. That's been a model for all the successful progressive movements we've had since the 1960s. Kevin's whole professional life is a testament to that style of leadership. He comes from and relates to working class people and moves just as easily among the university and economic elites. He exemplifies the kind of leadership that creates a participatory democracy that the SNCC civil rights workers aspire to. The kind of leadership that encourages open debate to build consensus instead of imposing decisions high-handedly from the top down. The kind of leadership that brings people together to solve common problems. And that's why when I'm elected 4th District Councilor, I'm so looking forward to working with the next mayor of Syracuse, Kevin Bott.
Thank you. Well, thanks to everyone in the media, and thanks to all of the good people who came out to support today. You know, before I get started, I do want to just say it's awfully hard to stand here on 9/11 and not acknowledge the fact that there's 2 flags at half-mast right now, and I don't really want to say anything about that other than to acknowledge what day it is and what this has meant to the nation and what it's meant for the lives of many people around the world. So I want to acknowledge that before I start. I want to thank Howie, who has been a great friend and a great mentor throughout this early part of the experience. And I want to thank you again for coming out, even though some of you have already called this race on November 5th. I don't blame you for that, because we're trying to do something unprecedented. We're trying to do something unprecedented because the crisis we face in this city and in this country is unprecedented. The challenges that we face are unprecedented. And for all the talk that we hear, whether it's on the online comment boards or from people around the country about wanting a candidate who's different and wanting change, we have to ask ourselves, when is that time going to be? And I'm going to say that the time is now. Every election cycle, you know, the rich get richer and the poor and working class and middle class work harder. The earth gets a little bit warmer, the tensions get a little bit deeper, and we have to ask, how much is enough? When will we as a people recognize what it means to live in a democratic republic, where the representatives of the people come from the people and actually represent the concerns and the sense of urgency that so many of us feel about what's happening in the state of the world? I'm in this race because of the sense of urgency that I have felt as a father and as a citizen and as a working person in this country. And it's a sense of urgency that frankly I don't feel is shared by the people that we continue to support and elect. My life has been about collaborative democratic leadership. That is primarily what I bring to this race. When I hear the other candidates talk about leadership, what I hear is management. And management and administration is exactly what we see across the country. People who have been trained to manage. Management happens from outside of the problem. Leadership happens from inside the problem. It emerges from the people's concerns. And there is no one in this race who can say on the three issues that the people of Syracuse say that they care most about, poverty and jobs, crime and education, no one can come close to the insider knowledge and firsthand experience that I have with those issues. And I'd like to talk about those issues now. And then afterwards, I'd like to just give you a bit of my own story and where I come from. And then I'll open it up to some questions. First of all, the biggest issue that we face is the economic crisis in the city. But even to say economic crisis removes the human being from that equation. What we're talking about is a city in which 53% of our young people live in poverty, go to school hungry. 37% of all of our residents living in poverty. A place where there are no jobs. I know this. I grew up in a blue-collar family, a working class family, aspiring to the middle class throughout the 70s and 80s. My father, who served in the U.S. Marine Corps and became a union boilermaker for 29 years before the recession of the early 1990s hit, and then was thrown out of work and didn't do meaningful work for 3 years. And I watched the impact that had on his dignity, on his self-worth, and what it meant to his understanding of the so-called American dream. And by the time he was able to find work again, well, his body had broken down. And today, my mother, who's 70 years old and suffers from lupus, in addition to a number of other health ailments, goes to work for 40 hours a week, 5 days a week, so that she can get a full pension and pay for the medical bills that they're going to need to survive. So I understand the economic issues that people face in this city from an insider's perspective. Our plan, and I say our because unlike a divided Democratic Party, we actually have a team here. We have a mayoral candidate, we have Howie Hawkins running in the 4th District, and we have a woman, Barb Humphrey, who's running for citywide school board. Our team's plan is first to do what everyone's saying, of course, to demand from Albany that they honor the revenue sharing commitment that Lee Alexander and the Big Six mayors worked out in 1971. Now, the reason that 8% has dwindled to less than 1% today is because at the same time that we were reducing that percentage, we were eliminating progressive taxation. So again, it's the poor, the working class, and the middle class who are paying more than their fair share, while the wealthy are not asked to pay in a progressive way. Now, the national average for revenue sharing is a little over 4%. If we were actually to take the gross state product of New York and bring the revenue sharing percentage to 4%, that would increase our current $72 million share of that pie to over $280 million. And that would solve, of course, our fiscal crisis. But I also understand that Cuomo has been very clear that he's not going to do that. So then we ask, on the other hand, that like Yonkers and New York City, we be given the right to impose a progressive income tax on ourselves. A progressive income tax that is not going to hurt anyone in a significant way, from 1/4 to 1/2% at the average income in the city, which is about $37,000, up to about 2% for the highest earners. If we can do that, we could bring in upwards of about $30 million a year. Again, another solution to the fiscal crisis. But most importantly, we need to create jobs for people in this city. And we have to realize that the 20th century economic model is done. Industry to that scale is not coming back. We have to look to cities in this country who have successfully figured out ways to create for-profit, worker-owned businesses that support local workers, pay them a living wage, and keep both dollars and tax dollars in the city. That's first and foremost. It's hot, pardon me. I want to move on to crime. And I don't know which to put first, education or crime. They're first amongst equals when we're talking about crises. But I'll talk about crime because I come at this from two different avenues. On one hand, my mother, as I mentioned, who's still working, has worked for the last 23 years as a staff member in our hometown Department of Parks and Recreation, in essentially our city hall, side by side with cops. She runs the DARE program, the Hooked on Fishing cop mentorship program, and the Say No to Drugs program in our community. I know cops. I understand very well the real challenges and dangers that police officers face. On the other hand, I've worked in New York State prisons. I was the education director downstate in 7 different medium and maximum security prisons. I wrote an entire 300-page dissertation trying to implement with 4 formerly incarcerated men a humane and innovative holistic approach to reintegrating formerly incarcerated people back into their communities and mitigating the ongoing sense of stigma that formerly incarcerated people feel. So I know these stories. I know the way that this folly of a war on drugs, which has depleted our treasure and destroyed the lives of individuals and families. I understand these people on both sides. And what we need to do is to instigate citywide dialogues that can bridge the gap and bridge the mistrust. When people talk about community policing, I understand what that means in its totality, and we will do that. I'm uniquely qualified, understanding criminal justice as I do, to take on this issue in a humane and just way. And finally, I want to talk about education. I have a PhD from New York University in a field that marries education and social justice. I have been a professor at the university level with undergraduates and graduate students at SU and New York University, and I've worked with students and teachers from kindergarten to 12th grade, including children who are labeled as learning disabled and emotionally disabled. I should also say that I taught through the Say Yes program for Syracuse University. I trained undergraduates to go into the city schools, so I have an understanding of exactly what's happening in the Say Yes program and understand that for all of the wonderful vision that it represents, the very real problems that no one seems willing or able to talk about in the city. I care about education. Our educational system should... Hello, you want to come up here with me? This is my son. The educational system is very important to me. I have 2 young children of school age. I think about education, and anyone who talks about Say Yes should preface their comments by saying that in the wealthiest country in the world, the fact that we need a Say Yes, in a place where once an equal quality public education was considered the cornerstone of our democracy, should be our shame. Why should we need a Say Yes if we were going to actually restore full and equitable funding for our city schools, which we can do by pushing Albany to honor the commitment they made in 2007? Can I put you down, please? Thank you. I care about education. We need to instigate, again, citywide dialogues to resist this federal and state policy obsession with high-stakes testing, making poor schools and rich schools compete with one another and doing nothing but undermining our children, our teachers, and our staff, and really undermining the whole idea of what a public education and a public investment is meant to signal. I know I said finally, but I do have a gift for gab. I want to say one more thing because there is another part of my platform that I feel it's very important to mention. And it's a hidden crisis not only in this county and in the city, but in the nation, and that's the issue of birth. Onondaga County ranks at or near the bottom in rates of infant and maternal mortality. This is a personal issue for us. My wife, who's standing over there in the corner, is a childbirth educator, a doula, an activist in the birth community. She works often with OBs and nurses, as well as community groups in Syracuse, to try to solve the problem of birth. We have an over-medicalized birth model that's doing nothing to help the well-being of our women, our families, and our babies. And I have to say, because it's important and it's related to poverty and education and the ghettoization that's happened in this city, that black women are 4 times more likely to die in childbirth. Black babies are 4 times more likely to die in childbirth than white babies in this county, and that has to end. That's my platform. As I said, I come from a place of creative, visionary, collaborative, democratic leadership, and I feel like to address and solve the challenges that we face in this city and in this country, we need to support someone who can bring people together to build consensus and get the work done. So I thank you very much for your support, and I'll take any questions you might have. Thank you.